Welcome to Women in WP, a bi-monthly podcast about women who blog, design, develop, and more in the WordPress community.
Welcome to episode 13 of Women in WP. I'm Angela Bowman.
I'm Tracy Apps.
And I'm Amy Masson.
Our guest today is the ubiquitous Michelle Schulp, whom we have all met at various WordCamps and conferences. She loves the open source community. She's a speaker, volunteer, organizer of many events and workshops around the country. She's also an independent graphic designer, front-end developer in Minneapolis. Her passions are communications and empowerment, and she believes in the power of why. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Happy to be here.
So we start out each episode by asking our guests to tell us a bit about their journey into WordPress. How did you get started?
Sure. So like pretty much everyone else, I didn't plan on being where I am today, although that includes physically as well as technologically, because I'm originally from the Chicago area. WordPress actually led me to Minneapolis too, so it's kind of done all things. But I got started with WordPress because I went to school for design, so that's a little weird because I actually do kind of have an education in what I do for a living. That's rare. But I'd heard of WordPress. I'd heard that it was maybe a content platform that designers could learn how to use, that it wasn't too hard. The agency I worked at the time was a Joomla shop, which I have a lot of opinions about the user experience of Joomla, and very few of them are good. So I knew I wanted to get away from Joomla. I didn't want to do that. When I went out on my own, I actually attended the CMS Expo in Chicago. I want to say this was in like 2010. And I sat in a bunch of the Drupal sessions because I'm like, I hear Drupal's pretty like real. I should learn that. And they were good. They were kind of hard. And then at the end of the day, there was a WordPress session, and outside the WordPress room was all the little like multicolor rainbow pins. And I was like, this is amazing. Look at all these pins. I need to go to this session. And I went into it and I was like, I should have been in here all day. This is so much better. But that didn't really start my WordPress journey. That just made me aware that it was a thing. I did a bunch of hacky stuff that I had no right to be doing for some clients. But really what started it was Googling Design Conference Chicago and finding WordCamp Chicago 2011. And I'm like, wow, this looks affordable and neat. I should attend this thing. And so I did. I sat in the back with my dad and talked to no one, and I engaged with no one and went to 0 social events, and I was amazed at all the stuff that I heard on the stage. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. These people are so smart and this is so cool. So after that, I was kind of at a point where I was trying to take some more risks and get more engaged, and I'm like, they said something about needing help next year, so I'm going to like be on that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be on that thing. Right. And so eventually when Heather put the call out for help for the following year, I replied, and they, for some reason, said yes and let me show up. So I show up as like this. I'm like, hi, everyone. I don't know WordPress things, but you are cool. Yeah, so I kind of got started through the community side, and actually one of the other foundational things in my WordPress career was attending WordCamp Milwaukee. That like I think it was that same, I don't remember if it was 2011. It was somewhere in the 2011-2012-ish time, back when it was at Bucketworks. And Bucketworks.
Yeah, I know. And Tracy was one of the people I saw speak, and I was like, oh my God, she's such a good designer and she's so smart. Like, right?
We all agree.
Yeah, I still think so, right? So it's true, confirmed. But that was amazing. And that was actually also where I met another woman in WordPress, Becky, who told me that Chicago had a bunch of meetups. And I was like, what? There's like meetups? And so I started going to those. And so actually it was like a whole bunch of like really cool women that like inspired me to get into WordPress and kind of took me under their wing. And obviously there was also like some awesome men, but it was like really interesting that the women were kind of the first ones to reach out. And so I got involved in the community in Chicago. that's how I started speaking. That's how I started wanting to learn more and starting to do more. And finally now I'm at this point where I've spoken at least 30 or 40, I don't know, a lot of WordPress and non-WordPress events. I've been on the organizing team of a WordCamp every year since 2012. And I have been a lead organizer 4 of those years at 2 different cities. And I've also gotten involved in like the AIGA. I'm on the board of directors there. So like, I don't know, it's just like snowballed into this whole thing. And it was all driven by community. And that's the part that keeps me coming back. And that's the part that makes me want to hang out with people like y'all on a Friday night. So
I mean, it's a party up in here now.
it is.
You drank the Kool-Aid. You're fully part of the cult of WordPress. And It was all because of rainbow buttons. I love that.
Yeah, that's what I love. It was the shiny rainbow buttons that got you.
It was. Yeah, no, the swag worked.
And I love that it was so many women in the community that really made you feel welcome and brought you in. And it just, I think, is a testament to the women of the community and how important we are to it.
Yeah, no, very, very, very much so. There's very few other communities where I can name like as many women that have had like a positive impact on my life. So it's pretty awesome.
I remember when I met you at LoopConf and I was so intimidated about being there, and you and Dan were so nice to me and you were so friendly. And then you like told me all about SaaS and you made me feel so cool and good and like, wow. And then I finally learned it. I just wanted to let you know this past year.
Awesome. Isn't it great?
Finally did it. I like
so change your world.
Addicted. I cannot handle it. But
now I can't go back.
You definitely had an impact on me and made me feel good. So I just want to let you know that.
I'm really glad. Stuff like that is the reason that I keep doing it. Because I mean, speaking and traveling and teaching and all that stuff, like, isn't what I get paid for, right? Like, I get paid to do work. And the other stuff is work that I don't get paid for. And it's kind of exhausting, but I love I don't know, I had so many people shape my life that I just want to be able to pay it forward and be able to just like make people learn something or feel welcome, or I don't know, like do to others what people did for me. So
that's awesome. Well, so we met at WordCamp Chicago. And for those of you that aren't watching the video, I'm using my WordCamp Chicago beer glass that I got at that WordCamp that you organized. And I also went to your talk that day. This is before we had actually met. And I think, a lot of it was on how do you designers and developers work together that aren't doing the same thing. And that was really important for me because I work with my sister and she does graphic design and I build the website. So it's really important for those 2 elements to be able to work together. And I found what you said very helpful and useful for, I think, a lot of people that aren't unicorns at doing it all.
Sure. Well, thanks. I kind of think of myself as a translator. I think of myself as a translator for my clients, not only to be able to tell them about what I do and explain the web to them, but also be able to kind of take their ideas that they maybe don't quite have and turn them into something real. And so I wanted to be able to use that on the stage when it comes to bridging the gap between all the different disciplines that come together to use WordPress. So that's kind of been my passion project for most of the involvement that I've had, both in WordPress and in the AIGA. The reason I joined the Minnesota Board of Directors for the AIGA as the Director of Technology is to go the other way, to be able to like bring technology into the world of design and like represent that. So I'm glad people notice that I do that. I don't know.
I can relate in a lot of ways because I also, I have the art degree, as doing the design such, and like you do a really good job of breaking down design so that like everyone can, not just developers but everyone, and being a designer and UX person, that like all the designer and UX people will be like, oh yeah, obviously you start your project with Y. You start with Y always. But like for anyone who's not familiar with that and that whole concept of approaching how to create something, why don't you speak a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. This is actually something I've been talking about it the whole time, but this past year, I've actually been able to take that specific topic and also give it to a DIY audience, people that either can't afford to or are trying to like do stuff on their own, and teaching people design thinking from that perspective. And really what it is, like, I always like to make the joke, and it doesn't get old for me. Like, I think I'm hilarious, but I always like to make the joke that I'm about to just like give them $100,000 design education in 5 minutes. And, you know,
I've made that joke during speaking as well. And I was like, you're welcome. You don't have to get an art degree now.
Yeah. Yeah. But pretty much it's like, if you can answer like why you did something and you've like made a choice thoughtfully, then you're designing. I mean, it may not be graphic design, it may not be visual design, but you are performing some kind of design, life design or design of it. I mean, like, that is what design is basically fundamentally curating like a thoughtful, purposeful solution to something. So I think more people would benefit from doing that. I submitted a talk to WordCamp US on a similar topic. So far my record is 0 for all on getting accepted. So we'll see how this year goes. It's fine, whatever. But I want to be able to keep spreading that message.
Yes, I agree. Designers everywhere rejoice.
Yeah.
Like, because you know, once you start thinking that way, it's like, you think of everything that way. And so when people just start saying like, oh, well, we're going to do this thing. Well, but why?
Yep.
What's the reason behind it? And people can't answer that when they don't start, you know, like thinking, just even forming their worldview around that.
Yeah, exactly.
So important when you're working, you know, with clients, with designers, is that question of why, because a lot of times it'll be, well, it's what they asked for. And that doesn't answer the question of why. To me, that answers the question of why you did it. It doesn't answer the question of why should we do it.
Yep. There's actually, so when you're talking about the definition of design, and people talk about design as problem solving, and there's a little bit of like argument about that, because they're like, yeah, but like, you can be a problem solver, but you also have to be able to properly define what the problem is, right? That's part of it. Like, the problem is not necessarily what's given to you in the brief. The brief is something that was put together, you know, the proposal, whatever it is, it was something that was put together by people that maybe don't have this background. And it's your job as a designer, not only to take what they say literally and provide a solution for that, but to look at this and be like, but why are you asking for this feature? Like, why are you asking for this particular set of services or this particular look and feel? Like, what about this appeals to you? What about this do you think will work? It's your job to also question everything, like ask why about the why, like, you know.
Basically like a toddler.
Yeah, I mean, I'm channeling like Animaniacs, like, why?
Oh, I love
okay,
it.
I love you, but bye.
Later, go up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, asking the why. And I think that, you know, it's very interesting you're teaching this to non-tech people. In what like arena are you working with the do-it-yourselfers?
Last month I gave a webinar series with iThemes, actually. So it was like a 2-day webinar that people could sign up for. And it was basically like a start to finish design bootcamp. So it was partly learning design theory. So basically this whole thing, like how to think like a designer, how to think about why, also how to think about your audience, understanding calls to action, understanding that kind of stuff. And then also on the flip side, some practical stuff that they could actually apply. Like if you don't have, you know, like an aesthetic background, these are some rules that you can learn to follow and it will probably look good, right? It's kind of like the rules that we learn, then we learn how to break them later in school, but like these are those starter rules. Like this is how you should think about fonts. This is how you should think about colors. This is how you should think about white space is fine. Add more. Like, you know. But it was really, really useful and really fun to be able to do that.
And in terms of the DIYers, you know, a lot of people move towards like the pre-made themes, the premium themes. Do you see any particular continual design mistakes out there in the kind of theme world that you wish would change?
Sure. So yes, but it's not necessarily like a visual design mistake. Like lots of things are very beautiful, and every aesthetic is what it is. Like aesthetic is pretty subjective. But I think the mistake is actually in the administrator user experience, that a lot of these builders or premium themes, it is just an overwhelming user experience for somebody that's non-technical. Like the reason they're trying to do it themselves is because they aren't a developer, they aren't a designer, but then we're asking them to make granular decisions about padding and spacing and margins. And the only difference is instead of writing code, they have to fill in a billion little tiny boxes, right? And then there's just like a billion settings and please pick all of these font sizes and please pick all these colors. And it's very overwhelming. So I think that's kind of the mistake that a lot of them are making is too much granularity. Like there is an audience for that. I'd say that, the implementer audience, the ones that have some knowledge of code, but also kind of want to be able to do it a little bit faster, maybe be able to produce some lower cost sites that are still somewhat custom. That's great. They can use that. But the problem is that they're marketing these as like DIY elements, and actual DIY people are just like, WordPress is hard. And it's because that's their experience of WordPress, is all these 5 billion settings panels, and none of them are the same as each other. None of them look like they slap their own look and feel on top of them, so it doesn't even feel native.
Yeah, there's no like patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so that's kind of why, like, love or hate it, what I like about Gutenberg is that it's trying to standardize the user experience for what it is. So like, this is how a builder of a page should look and feel and work. Now, is it there yet? I don't think it's there yet, but that's kind of a good goal for it to have. Like the customizer did the same thing with settings pages. Like, let's try to standardize how we interact with this stuff and put it all in one place. Gutenberg's trying to do the same thing. It's not perfect, but it's better than 5 million different settings panels everywhere.
And one of the things, especially having doing client work, especially we think about like, well, the user, how does this affect the user? Well, the back end is, especially when you're doing client work, that's another user. You've completely ignored if they can't actually modify and manipulate and manage and administrate the page. They're like, oh, nope, that's half your user right there.
Yeah.
Really.
Exactly. Empowering the admin user has been a really big part of all of the projects that I do. I tell my clients I am not necessarily interested in the business of updating their site for them, because the entire point of having a content management system is so that you don't need to be chained to me. Like, I'm always here to answer questions. That's totally fine. But I don't want you to have to come to me to add a post. Like, I don't want you to have to come to me to put a new page together. Like, I want you to be able to do that. And that's like how this should work. Like, yeah, I can build a new feature for you. I can design a new thing for you. I can help you if you need help, maybe finding new graphics or building a custom infographic or something cool. But I don't want to build a page for you. I want to make it easy for you to build a page.
So I know we've talked a little bit because we've both kind of been like parallel, like we've been doing our own thing. And, lately I've been doing more UX stuff and corporate, big scale and stuff, as I hear you have. And so one of the things is, especially when you're working in corporate and there's like seemingly an endless budget, so that they can do all the research, they can do all of that, they can do the whole process of the design thinking. But in the freelance world, that's not, or, my small business, I don't have the budget or time to do that. So what from all of your corporate world in the UX of like research and all of that, what are some ways that that the common person or small business could take away and use?
Sure. So that's very, very true that there's like there's an entire like UX research field that's even beyond the stuff that I know how to do.
Oh yeah. There's a whole other department within another.
Like the sociologists and all those people and the statisticians, right? Like they're, and they're awesome and super smart. But the average small to mid-sized organization doesn't really have access to those tools. So some things that I like to do that kind of run in parallel but smaller. One, if they have an existing site already, like hopefully they've got some analytics. So at the very least, we can see how people are behaving. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can draw conclusions from that, because it could have a high bounce rate because the design is bad, or people could be showing up on a page that they didn't actually want to show up on. So like we take it with a grain of salt.
Or they found their stuff right away and left.
Yes, that's exactly right. Like my site's super efficient. Like you only need to visit one page. Yeah. But so that's one thing, is just hopefully with an existing site having access to some analytics just to get a general idea of, I mean, what is the traffic coming to my site? Are we talking 10 people? Are we talking 100 people? Are we talking 1,000 people? Like, I don't know. That's useful. The other thing, though, is I kind of go the questionnaire method. So this usually has to do with rebrands or like repositioning, re-strategizing. And this is actually one of the things I turned into a worksheet for the webinar that I did, was this kind of deep dive into your site and your environment. I have them go through a questionnaire that talks a little bit about their brand voice. Like how do they, like what is the way they want to be perceived? What would they describe as their personality, like on a continuum of several different factors? What's the takeaway that they want people to have? I also talk about what are other people in your space doing that you think is successful, and what do you think is not successful? Like what do you see going on around you? Like awareness of the marketplace. What do you see other people doing that aren't necessarily in your space, but you feel is solving a similar problem in some way? Like this is a really good e-commerce thing. Like they sell t-shirts and I sell dog food, but like this is a really intuitive thing. Like let's talk about that. Or this thing is making really good use of imagery, even though it's a totally different field than me. So like kind of, again, awareness of what's going on outside of your own site. Another thing that we talk a lot about is call to action type stuff. And the way that I talk about that with people, and I've done this in talks before, so there's no secret sauce here at all, but we talk about verbs. Because verbs are what people do. And every website has a verb reason, right? Like websites exist for some kind of verb. The verb that your user is going to do. So it might be buy something. It might be contact you. It might be go to your store. It might be call you. It might be, whatever the verb is, like the purpose of the site. And some people are like, oh, but the purpose of my site is to educate. I'm like, no, like you want them to do something. Like how are we educating them, right? Like what's the purpose? Are you educating them so that they see you as a thought leader and then they contact you to do work? Are you educating them because you want them to sign up for your like e-learning program? Like what is this, right? So there's like a conversion verb, right? So we talk a lot about that, and then how to kind of engage people that way. But so it's a little bit more anecdotal and hypothetical when you're in kind of small business world. And then hopefully we can look at whatever the analytics are doing after we've done stuff and see if, where we went makes sense.
I just was in this SEO conference last week, and one of the presenters, a woman, was talking about people's homepages and the hero image, and how you need to have something on it. And I loved her quote because she said, no one cares about your stock photo, like your beautiful stock photo. No one cares about that. That needs to serve a purpose. And I guess that gets back to the why. Why is this thing here? Because it's pretty. No, it has to have more of a purpose. And so she said, if you're going to have that, you need to have a call to action on it, a message, something that makes it have a reason to take up so much real estate.
And even just the, like, no one cares about your product or your business. They care about what your business or your product can do for them.
Yeah. They don't want to drill. They want a hole in the wall. Yeah. That's a bit like that. That's like one of my favorite metaphors that I ever heard. It's like, we like to sell drills. Like we talk about how great the drill is and how many speeds it has and whatever. And they're like, yeah, but I just want a hole. Like drills make holes. So I guess I need a drill. But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk about that hero image with the call to action I probably have that conversation once a week. And then, or the sliders. We need to have 20 images that say,
Oh God.
Yeah, it seems like all the important, I tweeted about that this past week, that I have clients who are like, we have to get this on the homepage because it's so important. It's this course that we're offering and we don't want people to miss it. And I'm like, but do you realize like most of your traffic is not even hitting the homepage? Like so that's interesting. And if it's really important, then they want it in that slider because they don't know how to fit it onto the homepage if there's not a slider.
Yep.
Well, and I think a lot of people, they don't know how to prioritize what's important. And so they want to put it all, and the only way to get it all is to put it in a slider. And, I just have to tell them, you're going to have to pick what's really important, and that's what goes there. And, maybe you change it every week or every month or whatever, but, if you put it on slide 3, nobody's going to see it.
Exactly. And that's why we have the conversation about primary verb and secondary verbs. In terms of call to action, like what is your ideal conversion? Like perfect user visit, what do they do, right? And then secondarily, okay, if they don't do that, what are 2 or 3 other things they could do? So like for me, perfect user visit would be filling out my contact form. Like that's how my website is set up for me. But there's other things they could do. So if they didn't do that, maybe a secondary thing that would be cool is like commenting in one of my blog posts or, going to my social media account and following me. Like those are secondary. It's still a conversion of some sort. It's still engagement. I don't have like a newsletter or anything. That could be something that they have. But the primary one is filling out my contact form. And so the point is, from anywhere on my site, I have to make it really easy for them to do that thing. And so that's why we have this conversation about the primary verb, because it's like, okay, so you have a lot of messaging and it's okay to have secondary things, but like this can be on a page by page basis. So like landing pages are a thing. We can optimize a page for something different than the homepage. Homepages are kind of this weird thing that are trying to do a lot. They're kind of like a pretty portal. But on any given interior page, like it needs to be optimized to do one thing. So we don't want to get in the way of ourselves. And we want to make it super easy for people to do whatever that conversion is from wherever they are in the process. I really hate those sales pages that are super, super long. And I'm already convinced like 2 paragraphs in. I'm like, cool, yes, you are smart.
Just tell me what it is, where the price is, where do I get it?
Yeah, like give me a buy button.
I just had that the other day. I was like, okay, keep going. Okay, I get it.
I tell people actually it's okay to build pages like that because, some people do need more convincing, but like intersperse it with buy buttons. Like
you ready to buy now?
Yeah. Like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Just put some, let the people that make decisions quickly, make them quickly. Don't lose them. And then the people that make decisions slowly, give them more content too. Like it's fine.
So I have a question about working with non-designers, and when you're giving them advice for people like the do-it-yourselfer that wants to do some of their own design, but they don't have any of the design software that professionals would use. What advice would you give them on how to get started?
Sure. So mostly for them, I tell them like you're not custom designing something to build from scratch. Like you're probably going to use like WordPress specifically, you're probably going to use a pre-existing theme or some kind of hopefully not overly intrusive builder. I set up my clients with a kind of custom builder thing that I've made out of advanced custom fields stuff. But you have to, if you're doing it yourself, like you have to kind of get out of the notion that it's going to be fully custom. I mean, that's the trade-off. But what I do is kind of empower them, again, with that set of rules. Like if you are picking fonts, like don't go below 16 pixels. That is your minimum, right? Pick one heading font and one body font, and they should be either in the same family or in vastly different families. Your body font should have this line height, and it should be readable at small sizes. Your heading font's probably somewhere between this and this line height, depending on if you do in caps or not. Like very concrete. Pick this number of colors, run them through one of these tools to make sure that you can read them when you're using them. If your colors are really light, don't use them for text. Like there's like rules you can follow to like do things that don't suck. Are they going to win design awards? Probably not, but like that's not the point. The point is to do your business, right? So
Have you considered putting that into like a PDF cheat sheet that you could hand out?
I have, in fact, and it is also one of the things that I gave away at the webinar. It's literally like this design checklist of rules, and plus like a space that you could fill in like which fonts you picked and which sizes you picked, because a lot of these builders, you have to enter stuff in a bunch of different places, and so it's kind of like the equivalent of my variable file in my SaaS thing, right? It's like, here's your written variable file, and now you have this to do your page building. That's actually really fun to put together, just because it's not something that I necessarily use. A lot of the other ones are things that I actually use, but that one was fun because I had to write explanations of what they all were, and I don't know, it made sure that I was like being thorough on my end, like, oh yeah, like probably we need to define like a footer color as opposed to a regular font color, because usually the footer is totally different than the rest of the site. Yeah, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right now trying to also, because you're thinking in design systems, basically, you think of like, for this purpose, this is what this looks like, you know? So like it, you know, also helps with like the hierarchy of like, okay, all heading 1 is going to be this, all heading 2 is going to be this, heading 2s are for this, you know, like all the purpose of that. So that like is one, I don't know, do you do style guides? Do you give them like that kind of like a brand guideline as well, or?
When I'm doing custom design work, because I don't work on mockups the same way that, you know, I'm not building a bunch of page layouts.
Yep.
So what I did put together is actually a kind of like like kind of a long form brand guide that goes through spelling out the logo, the colors, and how they're used. And I also just started making notes on which colors should or should not be used to set different types of text based on like accessibility standards, like so that they have that as a reference. Like, only use this for icons, don't use it for text. Like, it passes for icons, but not text, like, you know. And then all the different HTML elements, so block level elements, H1 through H6, paragraph links, forms, and like just a visual representation of what these all look like. That I can like show to them as like, here's a thing. And then the other thing I do is, since I build everything modularly, I do a mock-up, I guess, of every single module, like header and then all the stuff in between and then footer, so they can kind of see all the different visual elements for their site. But they get that as part of like a reference too, as well as like on the actual site, like they get a private page that has all the modules enabled and like all the stuff, so they can break it. Hopefully we're also hopefully we're also using like managed WordPress hosting, and we have like a staging site that they can go break too. So because I want to empower them to break stuff. Like, that's half the fun. Like,
that's how I learned.
Yeah,
I made the most awful things and broke so many things. That's how I learned.
Yeah. And it's really fun. Like, they're a little scared to like want to do, like, they want, like, a lot of my clients, like, I really want to like do this. I'm excited. I don't want to break it. I'm like, okay, here's this thing where if you break it, we just blow it up and start over. It's totally fine. It has nothing to do with anything. Go be weird. It's fine. Like,
go be weird.
Yeah. I had to do that with one client because we have the staging environment, but I had some developers working on a project on that. And then the owner of the company, he wanted to be messing around with things on his own because he's learning. And I'm like, I'm going to make you your own special little sandbox here. And it's so adorable because he's just going to town and he's showing me stuff he's doing. I'm like, that's great. Now I know what you want to do. Here's how we're going to do it. But you know, good for you for taking that lead. But he had to have his own sandbox. And I'm like, you can do whatever you want in here. And it took him a while to realize the reason why I had him do that. So he didn't break his live site with the store on it and everything. And he had to learn a little bit the hard way on that. But once he got it, he loves his little sandbox. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, people just want to feel empowered to do what they want to do, right? Like, nobody wants to feel stupid. And that's kind of a little bit of a downside in our industry. It's not as bad in WordPress, but like in a lot of the tech industry, I mean, we tend to be kind of condescending towards non-tech people. Like, oh God, clients, like, it would be so great if it weren't for them, right? But
we wouldn't have jobs.
Yeah, and also like they know so much about their business that we don't know anything about. Like, they do things.
You don't want me to build a house for you,
right? Like, That's why I really like partnering with people that are very passionate about whatever it is they're doing, because that's going to get me excited about it. It doesn't even matter if you manufacture toothpaste caps for a living. Like if you could have a 3-hour conversation about toothpaste caps and get super excited about it, like I am stoked to build your website, because like we are going to solve all the toothpaste cap problems. Like it's going to be fun.
So that kind of segue, because you want to empower people. You don't want to talk over them. So what do you do? Because I know you and I are similar. We make our own, like, kind of, here's your customization, like ACF. That's how I've been doing it. And now I've been trying to translate it into Gutenberg blocks. So, which I think we should talk about the nerdy part of that later. But, but what do you do to strike that balance of, I want to empower my customer, my client, but I don't want to overwhelm them. So, and also I don't want them to be able to use white text on a white background.
Sure. I mean, for one thing, I'm generally not letting my clients pick colors or fonts or anything. Like their job is to be able to build and arrange content types, and not to be making design decisions. So I will have already made the design decisions. We will come up with all the set of rules of, if this is after this, it'll do this. And if this is after this, it'll do this, and it'll be a thing. All they have to do is just take the Legos and like put them in places and put their words in them. And that's really awesome, because they can build whatever they want out of Legos, but I'm the one designing the injection mold to build the Legos for them to assemble. So that's kind of how I separate it. And what I tell my clients is like, I want to empower you to be like the best WordPress user, right? Like you should know your way around the admin panel. You should be able to be like, yep, that is under this and this is under this. And if I want to do this is this, and the menus are here. Like you should be like the best WordPress user. And that doesn't mean that you have to understand what I do. It just means that you have to understand your admin area. It also sometimes means that you're creating custom user role type stuff to be able to limit access. So every one of my clients always has an admin account that has the same level of access as me, because it's their website, not mine. But a lot of times there's multiple people that are going to be working on it, and maybe they don't want to be logged in as an administrator and like have to see all that stuff. So many times I'll create very specific custom user roles that only have access to certain things, so they can just do the stuff that they need to do and not be distracted by all the other crap, basically. Like, I don't need to see the appearance panel if I'm never going to use it. Like, I'm not, so between those things, it's been pretty successful.
We're running out of time now, but if you would like to tell everybody where we can find you online before we go.
Sure. So I am Marktime Media pretty much everywhere on the internet. I'm also like only one of 2 Michelle Schulps like in the world, so it's pretty easy to Google me and find me. I got great SEO, right?
She's the one with the pink hair.
Right. Yeah. Not that you can tell with my wall behind me. I'm just blending into. But you can also you can find me at marktimemedia.com for my business. MichelleSchulp.pink, or my name is Michelle.com for my personal stuff. And I also recently, within the last couple of months, I started a blog called Fitness and Freelance, which talks about basically mental and physical health as an independent creative professional.
And is that iThemes webinar available?
I believe it's still available. Yeah, I believe it's still available it was called the Web Design Bootcamp. Obviously I gave it live, and so that part's over, but I think it's evergreen.
Okay, I'll definitely put that for anyone who's listening. If you visit our website and look at the show highlights,
sure,
I'll have links to all the good stuff there.
Yep, there were a couple of free ones too that they put out. So even if you don't want to pay for it and you're sick of watching my WordPress TV stuff, you can you can watch the free webinars.
It's the whole Michelle just channel, basically.
Yeah.
We can't get enough of you.
Oh my goodness.
Well, thanks so much for being on today. It's really interesting talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, or join our Facebook group. We would be honored if you subscribe to the show. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes. Finally, if you want to be on the show or know someone who would, visit our website at womeninwp.com. Until next time.